Morning. How's everyone? Not bad? Just okay? What's that commercial? Just okay is not good enough, right? You guys have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
Yes, I do know.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Not Gillette. It's like Geico or whatever it is. Isn't it? Progressive, something like that. If you don't have your name tag up, please put it up. Are you guys with your teams?
Yeah.
Are you with your teams? Yeah. Okay, listen, you're not with your team.
I wasn't here last Thursday.
You weren't here on Thursday. So do you have a team? Which team do you have? Name, number? Stephanie's in team number 4. Who's team number 4? Raise your hand. Work with them. Okay, you guys get with your teams. Now, before you get started, I want to say one thing. I go through these, I look through your posts, at least until I go to bed at night. Then you guys, some of you post them late, which I'm okay with. That was our deal. But I want to emphasize to you our understanding, and that was, first of all, the majority of the posts that I'm looking at are really well done, well thought out, very specific with regard to things from the chapter. That's what I'm looking for. But I need everybody to do that, because that's our understanding in here, because we're not having quizzes, we're not having tests. Everybody get that? That's because if I get a trend that's dropping off, I've got to go back to quizzes and tests, because I have to demonstrate to the university the learning outcomes. Understood? All right, so I need everybody to make the extra effort to apply what you read in the chapter to the post. Got it? All right, now let me give you some good news, I think. I convinced the college a while back to allow us to teach this class as a hybrid, or what's known as a flipped class. In other words, you guys, the information is in the book. We talk about it, but it's more important to me that we apply it. I think you'll learn a lot more when you apply it. So we're kind of doing this class as a kind of a hybrid. A hybrid, typically you meet half the time, right? And you do this class, we're probably going to meet at least 2/3 of the time. But what I want to do for the rest of this chapter, after our discussion today, I feel pretty confident we'll get through what I want to get through today. We will not meet on Tuesday, but I have an assignment for you that I want you to do by Tuesday. Yep. Wait. It'll come to you. It'll be on Blackboard. Spencer? Yeah? Yes. Okay. It'll come to you on Blackboard. You'll have it, but it just enables you to apply your original post, your team post, what we talk about in class, and the material in the chapter. All right? Just another reinforcement. Everybody good there? All right. We'll go over that again at the end of class. I just wanted to give you that heads up. That's where we're headed, assuming we get to where we want to go. All right. Everybody understands what we're looking for in terms of this team post. We've talked about that enough. We're looking for the optimum or ideal post gleaned from the individual posts by your teammates. Right? Go. This needs to be a collective reminder about turning this on. Let's review very quickly what you learned, I assumed, in your intro class and in some of your accounting classes and your finance classes. Right? So somebody first tell me the difference between the franchisor and the franchisee. Arish? Franchisor does what?
Franchisor is like the company that provides you with all the equipment, marketing tools, their brand, they let you use their brand name.
And their reservation system, which is really a big value. Right? We call them the franchisor or the licensor, because they are licensing you to use their brand, their name, right? Their marketing, proprietary marketing projects and things like that. Now, you pay for that privilege. You pay them an upfront fee, right? And you pay them royalties over time. Typically, your royalties are tied to the number of reservations that they send you through the reservation system, and you also agree to give them so much money a month that they can use then as a collective marketing program, right? That's how companies like Subway that have one corporate-owned store but 10,000 franchisees can afford to advertise at the Super Bowl. That is $2 million for 30 seconds, right? If it was just one Subway, could they afford $2 million at the Super Bowl? No, but if you've got 10,000 stores sending in $1,000 a month, you can see where that money would add up pretty quickly and enable them to aggregate those funds and advertise. The power of franchising, right? Very good. All right. The franchisee is the buyer or the licensee, right? Stop with that. I'm assuming you remember the pros and cons of franchising versus independently operating. All right. Now, if Arish is the franchisor and Jill is the franchisee, Jill has money. She's a bank. She's an investment company, an insurance company. She's a group of individuals that have done well and want to invest. But do they know the hotel business or restaurant business? Let's stick with hotels. They know the hotel business. Don't take this personally, but let's say you don't. Okay, so Jill doesn't know the hotel business, but she's heard that this is a good investment. And Arish convinces her that it's a good investment. What options does Jill have and her group of investors have to hire expertise to help run the hotel?
A management company?
Andrew, a management company. We call them a third-party management company. Why are they a third party? They're outside of Jill's business, right? Outside of the investment group. Now, I'm going to complicate it a little bit. Arish is the franchisor. But oftentimes, franchisors have created separate management companies. Could Jill hire Arish's management company to operate the hotel? Yes. Still a third-party management company, just a separate revenue-generating opportunity for Arish's company. Marriott does that. Hilton does that. IHG, Intercontinental Hotels Group, does that. The major ones do that. Do you see? All right. But let's say that Jill wants to keep arm's length. Because is there a potential conflict between Arish owning the franchise and operating the hotel for allegedly Jill's benefit? Do you think there could be some torn allegiance between Arish's franchise company and Jill's interest by the management company? And when Jill hires a management company, who does she want them to be totally devoted to? Her. That's called a fiduciary obligation. She's hiring them to represent her as an agent, right? They owe her total allegiance. Well, they're going to say to Jill, oh yeah, the money won't bother us. We're good. We're going to always put your interests first. What do you think about that? Lies. Well, it happens every day. But you've got to understand the potential for conflict that exists. Right? All right. So Jill goes out and hires Jordan's third-party management company. So far, so good. So we've got franchisor, franchisee, third-party management company. So far, so good? Who do the employees work for at the hotel? The management company. They work for the management company. But how many of you have ever worked at a hotel that was managed by a third party and had no idea who you work for? Yeah. It happens every day. We do a very poor job of educating our employees and our guests about who actually is responsible for operating the hotel. And here's why this is important. If a sexual harassment case occurs at the hotel, one employee against another, who's responsible potentially in damages to the plaintiff? Which is also the employer. Exactly. I thought you said or. The management company and, oh, I see what you were trying to say. And or. Yeah. Right? Got it. Management company who is actually the employer. Yeah. Now, should Jill's company have any responsibility to the plaintiff? Raise your hand if you think Jill's company, the owner of the hotel, should have some responsibility to Jordan's employee. Raise your hand. It's okay. Yeah, that's about where the country is divided too. You look at juries and you look at governments, they kind of see it that way too. There's a lot of discussion going on right now about, wait, those of you that feel like Jill's company should have some responsibility, why do you feel that way? She's the one that hired the management company, right? Is she looking over the management company's shoulder? Should be. Interesting. How many of you see it that way? Yeah. If you don't see it that way, why not? Yes, sir?
At that point, I just view that person as an investor, so they're literally not putting their fingers down on anything.
Let's understand this right now. Liability follows control. Do you understand? Responsibility, therefore liability, follows control. Whoever has control of the day-to-day operations is the primary party responsible to the employees and guests, right? It's when the ownership group or the franchisor gets involved in decision-making, day-to-day decision-making, not long-term strategies about investing and things like that, but things about levels of security, slashing budgets for maintenance that impacts safety, not following appropriate training protocols, right? Insisting that, if Jill insisted that Jordan's company hired the person that did the harassing, would that change your mind? Possibly. If Jordan came to Jill and said, we've got a problem with this employee, we've had complaints about them harassing people, and Jill were to say, you know what? We've worked with this person for 20 years. It's an important person. We want them in this sales position. They've been delivering results. Keep them on. Does that and then they harass somebody. Does that change your mind about potential responsibility for Jill? Yes. Okay. Do you see how that shifted the control? Yeah? And the influence. And do you see why that then might be fair and equitable for Jill's organization to have potentially some responsibility for that, right? And if the same thing happened from Arisha's perspective, yeah, as the franchisor, you could see that. When it happens between Arish and Jordan, the franchisor and the third-party management company, we call that joint franchise, a joint franchise. And there's a big push in some areas of the law to hold the franchisor routinely responsible for the acts or failures of the franchisees, with the thought that Alec brought up about they knew or should have known, right? Because they made the deal with them and licensed them. But the other half of the legal push is that, wait, that's not fair to Arisha's franchise company because they're not involved in the day-to-day decision-making and operations of Jordan's third-party management company. So the responsibility and potential liability should rest with Jordan's company. Does everybody see that? Okay. Is Hilton a franchisor or a franchisee? Franchisor. Are they a licensor or a licensee? Licensor. Licensor. Is Jill franchisor or franchisee? Franchisee. What is Jordan? Third-party management company. Name some third-party hotel third-party management companies. White Lodging is a good example, although they've started to invest and buy in and becoming their own franchisees. But they started out as a very successful third-party hotel management company. Can they manage multiple brands? Yes. They will do Hiltons, IHGs, they'll do Marriott's. Whatever the market demands, or the ownership wants, they're in. And then they go and apply to become preferred management companies by the big brands. So now when Jill goes to Arisha's franchise company and she says, by the way, I need some expertise to run the hotel, Arish might say, well, we have a management company, but there are also 4 other hotel management companies that we've identified as very successful, that understand our standards. And here's a list of those companies that you can choose from. We call them preferred management companies. Have you got that? Okay, let's complicate it a little further. Now, as I mentioned to you, Jill does not have hotel expertise. So she signed a management contract with Jordan's third-party management company, White Lodging, Aimbridge, Interstate Hotels, all examples of big hotel management companies, but there's like 1,000 of them today in the United States. So Jill signs with them, but does Jill know how to manage the management company? You've got to totally rely on them for what they tell you. The accounting, the metrics, everything, right? So because there's a lot of money at stake. Jill has invested $500 million in this hotel and resort. Is she just going to take Jordan's word for it? No offense, Jordan. Well, no, she's not. But owners did for a long, long time. Then they got smart. Now, Jill would hire, if she was concerned at all about the reports and the metrics and the operations, Jill would hire what's known as an asset management company to audit or look over the shoulder of Jordan's management company. What's the difference between an asset management company and a third-party management company? Both are hired by whom? Jill. What's the third-party management company's role? Operations of the hotel. Day-to-day operations of the hotel. Hire and fire. Establish policies, right? Legal compliance, safety compliance, marketing, sales, revenue generation. That's what third-party management companies bring to the table. They bring experience, expertise. They have a large pool of employees to draw from, That's why Jill hired them. What does the asset management company do for Jill? Audit the third-party management company to make sure that the third-party management company is in compliance with the RISH, with his franchise agreement. If you guys aren't paying attention because you're on your phone, I'm not going to be happy about that. Now, put your hats on and clearly tell me, who does the asset management company owe allegiance to? Totally to Jill. Who does the third-party management company owe allegiance to? Jill. Right? Okay. Jill owes Arish's franchise company not allegiance, but the obligation to comply with the franchise agreement. Do you see that? And reciprocating, Arish's company owes the same obligation to comply with the agreement to Jill. Everybody got how all this web works? And could you summarize it for me if I asked you to? Good, because that's what I'm going to ask you to do on your writing assignment. Well, we're not going to have class on Tuesday. Instead, I'm going to move up the written memo assignment and have that as your assignment for Tuesday. I had another assignment in mind, but I think this is even better. All right. So Spencer will post that. It will be a post. The assignment is in your assignments folder on Blackboard. But that's the information that you're going to use to respond to the assignment. Right? I'm asking you to take the position to explain to your employees the different parties that are involved in the ownership operation of the hotel. Right? All right. Very good. That'll cement that for you. Now, Gabby and Van brought up a good question during the team discussion. Where would Jill get the money to invest in the hotel? Jill, where would you get the money? We could get them from investors. What kind of money is that called? Equity. The people invest in the money. So that's not a loan. That's an investment. If the business goes bad, does Jill have to pay them back? No. That's an equity investment. That's why it's risky. That's why they want a big return. What's ROI? Return on investment. The greater the risk, the greater they want, should be that they want to see a higher return on investment potential if they're going to take this risk. Now, another place to get money is where, Gabby? Bank. We can go to a bank, right? We can borrow the money from a bank. That's the assignment that you're post. You're the bank. Right? Now, why? Yes, ma'am.
What about bonds?
Bonds typically don't work in the private. Some corporate bonds could be issued, but it typically doesn't work that way in the hotel investment side. Not to say it never happens that way, but it can. Although, if you look at public-private partnerships, like the Marriott Marquis or the Hilton Hotel, the city would sell bonds to raise the money to do that. But bonds are loans, essentially. They can default on the loans, and they're unsecured assets typically. We'll get into that another time in chapter 6. But just stay with me. It's a great question. Let's stay focused on a typical loan structure. If you're in the bank, why would you loan money to Jill? Interest. How do banks make money? They make interest, right? People deposit money into banks. Banks aggregate those deposits, and they turn around and lend it out at a higher interest rate than they're paying the deposits, right? They might pay you 0.25% today, and they're going to turn around and loan that money out for 4.5%. Do you see? But they have to be careful who they loan that money to and on what projects, because banks owe you that money when you ask for it, right? That's why banks don't charge you if you have a minimum amount of money in your accounts, or you have longer-term savings accounts or CDs, 2, 3, 5, 10-year certificates of deposits. They'll pay you a little higher interest rate because it reduces the risk that you're going to ask for the money anytime soon, right? So they know this money is out there and available for them to invest. You get all that? So if Jill goes belly up, so to speak, and can't pay back the bank, how does the bank get its money back? Because this wasn't an investment by the bank. Banks cannot make investments except in some treasury instruments, U.S. treasury instruments, right? So how do they ensure that Jill will pay them back? The property. They take a security interest. It's called collateral. Jill's group would sign over their interest to the bank, right? And the bank would hold that in trust. We call it a deed of trust or a mortgage. All of you are familiar with that term. You buy a house, same concept. And what it says is that if Jill doesn't pay the bank back that's scheduled on the amortization, what's an amortization? No, depreciation is different than amortization. A payment. It's a payment. How many have a car payment? You buy a car, sometimes you don't pay it all up front. Well, if you buy a $10,000 car over 5 years, your payments are going to be so much a month for 5 years, right? $10,000, 5% interest. We amortize that out over 5 years. Your monthly payment is the amount due each and every month. If you don't make those payments, what can the auto finance company do? Take the car. It's exactly the same thing. You've secured that debt with your car. If you don't pay, they take it back. If Jill doesn't pay Gabby's bank, what's Gabby's bank going to do? It's called foreclose on real estate. In autos, we call it repossessing. We have a different word for it in real estate. It's called foreclosing, right? Gabby can foreclose on the hotel, right? Now, let's say that Gabby's bank and a lot of other bankers in the country loan a bunch of money to hotel operators. And the economy sinks, and all of the hotels go bankrupt. They cannot sustain. People aren't traveling. They're not paying for hotels. They cannot sustain the operation of the hotel and service the debt. Now what happens? They file bankruptcy, which means what? Gabby's bank has to take over. They foreclose on the hotel and they own the hotel. But can they turn around and sell it? Well, they can, but what are they going to get for it? Nothing. So it's just going to sit there empty, and an empty building is going to do what? Decay and depreciate. Right? Because it's not being used, it's not being maintained. So the value of that asset continues to plummet. Right? So if Gabby is overloaded with hotel loans, what ultimately could happen to the bank? Jimmy? The bank is going to lose its liquidity. It's not going to pay its depositors back, right? Because you want your money. So what does the bank have to do? The banks in the United States can't file bankruptcy. They get taken over by, it's the same concept. Who takes over the banks in the United States? FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC. Who's that? Us. You, the taxpayer. You bail them out. In some instances.
Isn't that what happened with the automotive?
That happened with General Motors. And look, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. Right? Because the governments have to make broad-based strategy decisions on the best interest of the country, hopefully. But here's the thing. Let's say Gabby's bank does not go broke, but they end up with 15 hotels in their portfolio. Does the bank know how to operate a hotel?
No.
So who are they going to look to keep the hotel open and operating? A third-party management company. Now stay right there in your mind. Now get this picture. It's about the mid-1980s. We used to have savings and loans back then. They were separate from banks. Banks couldn't make real estate loans back in the day. So we had savings and loans that would make commercial real estate loans and loans to your parents for their homes. The savings and loans did exactly what I set up for you in that example. They loaned billions and billions of dollars on hotel assets, and they kept inflating the value, and people kept flipping the hotel. So Rachel, I would sell a hotel to Rachel for $5 million, and 30 days later, Rachel would sell it to Myra for $10 million, for whatever, what did I say before? $5 million, Rachel would flip it 30 days later to Myra for $10 million. And there were some corrupt appraisers out there that were getting kickbacks from the banks, right, as part of the closing, right? And it just became a corrupt cycle. And all of a sudden, as all corrupt cycles or schemes, they ultimately got crushed, and the people holding the bag were mainly the savings and loans. So the government had to take over all of these savings and loans, all of these hotel assets. At that time, there was really one hotel management company in the country. So what happened was, Gabby just foreclosed on these hotels. Well, there really wasn't any hotel expertise out there, third-party expertise. So who did Gabby end up hiring to run all of her hotels? The general managers that she just foreclosed upon. Right? Yeah. Why? Well, it probably wasn't the general manager's fault, right? The economy sunk. It wasn't their fault that they couldn't operate. They're not the ones that put the debt in place, right? That wasn't their choice. As long as Gabby vetted them and they had their operational metrics in place, they're a good operator. But that's how third-party hotel management companies came to be in this country. Was the financial collapse in the 80s, the savings and loans crashed as well, so the hotels went down, the savings and loans went down with them. It was the FSLIC at that time, the Federal Savings Loan Insurance Company. We no longer have that anymore because we don't have savings and loans because now banks can do all of those things. Yeah. And so they took it over and needed expertise, and the hotels that were foreclosed upon, all those people lost their jobs. Wow. Gabby came in, the FSLIC came in, and they hired all these former GMs to run the hotels, and these former GMs said, wait, I can do this for this hotel, I can do this for this hotel, I can do this for this hotel. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how opportunity springs from disaster. And many of you are going to go to work for hotel management companies, and that's how it all got started. Now you know the rest of the story. You guys ever listen to Paul Harvey? You have no idea who that is, do you? Look up Paul Harvey and listen to one of his radio announcements. He used to tell fabulous stories. He's got this incredible voice. And then at the end, he always had something very cool at the end that was kind of, a surprise. And then he would say, and now you know the rest of the story. But I mean, millions of people used to listen to him on the radio. It's crazy. Check him out. All right. So you guys understand all of that, right? Now let's go back to your post. So you're the banker. Did the fact that they were a franchisee matter to you in your decision? Yes. It looked to me like most of you understood that concept. Okay. Do you understand the concept, the first part of that post, which is, do you understand the difference between organizational structure and operational structure? Organizational structure is the business entity you choose to establish to own the business. Start with the least complex, and let's name them all. The least complex. Sole proprietorship. Very good. Next. General partnership. Next. Yeah, we kind of get into a tie now with limited partnerships, limited liability companies, C corporations, S corporations. Does everybody see that? All right, now, listen to me carefully. I rarely ever tell somebody so definitively something, but I feel compelled to tell you this. Never, ever use a general partnership to own a business. Never. Why not? Well, it can get sticky quickly, but there's a real key potential liability reason which should always preclude you from working in a general partnership. It is Adam. The entire amount. That's called joint, J-O-I-N-T, joint, knee joint, elbow joint, and several, S-E-V-E-R-A-L, several. Jointly we're responsible, and severally, apart, we're responsible for the entire debt. So if Adam and Arish, let's use Andrew, we've already got Arish doing all kinds of things. If Adam and Andrew become general partners, and they go out and they take on a loan of $100,000 and they just put it in the partnership name. And Andrew saves his money, but Adam spends it like crazy. And the business goes down and can no longer satisfy the debt, the amortization schedule. And the bank calls the note. Says, hey, this is due in full now because you're late. Right? Adam's going to look to Andrew and go, sorry, dude, I'm out of here. So who's the bank going to look to for the full amount? Andrew. Now, Andrew can try to collect from Adam, but that ship has sailed. Right? So that's called joint and several liability. Don't ever do that. You're just setting yourself up for a bad problem. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't ultimately end up being responsible for the whole debt. Let's go back to the very beginning of this post. If you're the bank and people come to you to borrow money against this hotel asset, are you just going to look to the asset to get paid back? What else do you want? When you buy a car, does the lender just look to the car, or do they also want you to personally guarantee the debt? You personally guarantee the debt. It's the same thing with the bank, with Gabby's bank and Jill. Jill's going to loan you the money, but it just depends on the value of the asset. If she's borrowing $500 million and the asset's worth $500 million, the bank's going to say, we can't just rely on the value of the asset. You need to personally guarantee this. And we're going to look at your financial statement to make sure you have liquid assets, money, that you can use to pay or keep up with the amortization schedule, or your partners do. So even though we create an entity, Jill says, well, we're going to do this in our LLC. What's an LLC? Limited liability company. She says, so we want you to loan the money to the LLC. Gabby's going to say, that's great, but what? Camille? What if you're the bank, what are you going to want to have in addition to the property as collateral?
You're going to want to have interest.
I'm going to want interest. That's part of the deal. But I'm also going to want Jill and her principals to personally guarantee the debt. So that if Gabby forecloses on the hotel, right? Let's say the property was worth $500 million when she borrowed the money, but now it's 4 years later, there's a recession going on. Now, when they foreclose, the most they can get is $250 million for it. Well, and let's say they've paid down $100 million on the $500 million loan, right? That leaves a $400 million debt. They get $250 million when they foreclose, which leaves a deficit of how much? $150 million, which they're going to look to whom to pay? Jill, the guarantors. Now, Jill, if she was smart, she only guaranteed, if there were 10 investors, she only guaranteed 1/10 of the deficit, right? And the other participants guaranteed 1/10. But the bank might say, everybody's got to go in for all of it, because we don't know what's going to happen to the financial status of everybody else, right? Which really makes it more of a general partnership, because now you're jointly and severally liable for all the money. Do you see? So the point of that is, even though you're careful about the business entity that you create, subsequent actions could put you in just as precarious position as being in a general partnership if you're not really careful. Trying to save you a lot of money here. Everybody got it? Okay. Let's come back then to our post. Actually, let's move from the post. Let's get into the chapter. When you're trying to decide the entity that you want to establish to own your business, we've talked about sole proprietorships, general partnerships, limited liability partnerships, limited liability companies, C Corps, S Corps. Yep. There are two, did you say franchise? No, hold on to that thought. I want to make this very clear. The ones I just listed are your organizational structures. Franchising is an operational structure. Independently owned and operated. Independently operated is an operational structure. Third-party management company is an operational structure. It has nothing to do with the organizational structure of the ownership of the business. You have to understand the difference. Right? There are two primary considerations. In the book, we lay them out for you in a chart. We actually give you 4 for each type of organizational structure. But the two primary ones I want you to always think about are taxation and liability. Taxation and liability. In a sole proprietorship, who pays taxes? The individual. Sole proprietorship, you just open a bank account, money comes in, money goes out, whatever's left, you pay taxes on. QuickBooks. General partnership, money comes in, money goes out. Whatever profit is left over is divided among the partners according to the partnership agreement. Each partner pays taxes. When you get into corporations, LLCs, S-corps, that's when the tax situation changes a little bit, primarily with a C-corp. Let's understand something so it's not too complicated. C-corp just means that it's in Chapter C of the Internal Revenue Code. S-corporation means that it's allowed in subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code. That's all that means, right? Some of you are looking at me like, ooh. You guys with this so far? Yeah. All right. Sole proprietorship, general partnership, limited partnership, limited liability companies, limited liability partnerships, S corporations, all the money passes through to the partners or shareholders, and it's taxed at the individual partner or shareholder's rate. That's why probably 90% of all hotels and restaurants are organized as LLCs, LLPs, or S-corps. I'll give you a financial example in just a second. Give me 1 second, Alec. The C-corp, the entity itself pays taxes on its profit before that money is distributed to the shareholders. In all the other situations, pre-tax profit is distributed to the partners or shareholders. All right? So in your notes, do this. Put C corporation on one side, all other entities on the other side. And draw a line down the middle between those two. C corporation, all other entities. You know what? Draw your T. You know what I mean? Draw your T. On the left-hand side under C corporation, put profit, $100,000. So profit on the left, $100,000 under C corp, $100,000 under all others on the other side of your line. Am I going too fast? 100,000 for each. So you got profit on your left, 100,000, 100,000 for both. Got it? Now, put tax underneath profit. Under the C corp, C corps, let's say they're taxed at 25%. So you've got $25,000 that the C corp has to pay in tax on that profit before they distribute the money to their shareholders. Underneath all others, put 0. Because the other entities do not pay tax on profit. They distribute all of their profits out to their shareholders and partners, right? Put distribution underneath tax on the left-hand side. Put distribution. How much does the C corp have to distribute to shareholders? Put $75,000. How much do all the other entities have? Put $100,000. Now on the left-hand side under distribution, write shareholder tax. Shareholder or partner tax. And that's usually a third at their individual tax rate. So how much would that be? $25,000. So under your C corp, put $25,000. On the right-hand side of your T, under all other entities, across that column of shareholder tax, right? Wait, did we do distribution on that side yet? Yeah, we did, 100,000, right? They shared 100. Under shareholder tax, it's a third. What's a third of 100,000? 33,000. Right? So that's collectively what your shareholders will pay out when they receive their dividends, right? If I get $10,000 out of the 100, I would pay $3,300 in tax, right? Andrew would as well if he had invested $10,000. You see how that works? Collectively, though, we're going to pay $33,000. Now, give me a total. How much do you have left on the C Corp side? $50,000 as disposable free cash flow for your investors. How much do you have? 67 or 66 to 750. 67. So all we did was elect S status, or we modified our entity to an LLC. We did that, and we saved how much money in $100,000? We saved $12,000. We saved $17,000, right? Now, that's just on 100. Think if it was $1 million, or $2 million, or $10 million. Now, that's why 90% of all hotels, restaurants are established as LLCs and or S corps because of favorable taxation. Now, and you say, well, why doesn't every business do that? Well, because there are limits. These are devices set up to encourage small business development. So it's limited to a certain number of investment or a certain amount of capitalization. When you exceed that number of investors or capitalization, you have to be a C Corp or a real estate investment trust that you saw in the book, right? Or you can go public and raise money that way, but you have to be a C Corp to do that because you exceed the capitalization caps. What's capitalization mean? Money. Amount of money invested. Amount of money put into the business, whether by loan or equity. Right? That's how you capitalize your business. All right. Now, but the second thing I told you about is liability. Liability follows what? Responsibility or control. So in a sole proprietorship, who's in control? The individual. Who's responsible for everything? The individual. In a general partnership, who has control? General partners. Who's responsible for everything? General partners, jointly and severally. In a C Corp, who has control? The corporation, operated by the board of directors and the officers. Right? But we protect the individual's assets when we get into C Corps, S Corps, limited liability companies. So the only assets that are available that creditors can look to pay back money are the assets of the business. So another reason you don't want to operate as a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, take the time to incorporate or set up an LLC or an S Corp so that you can protect your personal assets. Right? It's really a sweet deal. So if I asked you today, if you're going to put in a nightclub, what kind of business entity would you own the nightclub in? And tell me why. An S Corp. Why? And you're taxed only once on the distribution. Very good. And why are most people going to an LLC than an S Corp? We didn't talk about this, but it's in the chart. Yes, Gunnar. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Okay.
From what I see, it says that all members have limited liability protection from the debts from the LLC unless otherwise provided.
Yeah, but that's he's already talked about that. But what's the third reason? So it's favorably taxed, personal liability protection. What's the other reason? Alec?
You can still technically be like the sole proprietor owner of an LLC. Like you could be the only partner.
You could be the only person that's involved in the LLC, and let me just take that a step further. An LLC is much easier to operate than an S corp because the rules regarding the operation of LLC are much simpler. It gives you all the benefits of acting like a partnership, but it gives you the personal liability protection. S corp was done 50 years ago. LLC, the concept was created about 30 years ago, and it evolved. It's just better. It's easier. It's simpler. It's not as costly to put together or to operate. Got it? Alec, you had a question a while back, and I went past it. What do you got?
Yeah, actually, this is just kind of a question like this. When you're looking at international corporations and conglomerates, how exactly?
Say that one more time. I couldn't hear you.
When you're looking at international corporations
Yes.
and conglomerates, like for example, it used to be like Hilton America's Hilton London kind of thing, and then it became Hilton Worldwide. What exactly do they organize as?
Same concept. Exactly the same concept. But the difference is then they may put some of their assets that could be subsidiaries of Hilton Worldwide. They might create different entities in the United Kingdom or in Malaysia that comply with those countries' business entity laws. Right?
So maybe like Hilton Worldwide based here in London owns a subsidiary in a different country.
Subsidiary in a different country. Yeah. Now, if you are a hotel company and you own and operate 10 hotels, do you want to own all of your hotels under one entity? No, because if his one company owns 10 hotels, Andrew's Hotels, and one hotel has a death in the swimming pool, and let's say Andrew has $10 million in insurance, but the jury awards $100 million in damages. Well, the insurance company is going to pay $10 million. Who's going to have to pay the other 90? Andrew. And what would be available to the plaintiff in order to collect that $90 million? All the other hotels, because that case was against your company. But if you had all of those hotels in separate entities, they would only be able to look to the one hotel. That happens a lot. It's like the Full Employment Act for lawyers. Right? Because that's what's going on today. All right. Look. Look at that chart carefully. That will help you understand this. Hold on. I got one last thing. The book talks about agency. I gave you a good example at the beginning of a third-party management company, right, being an agent. So in that situation, Jill was the principal. Hold on, wait, your name was? Yes. Jordan, for a third-party management company, was the agent. Agents represent principals. How many of you are into sports? All the athletes have what? Agents that represent them. They negotiate on their behalf. They act on their behalf. If an agent, if one of the players' agents went to the team and said, "Hey, I need a new contract for my person. But if you'll," and he wants $5 million or she wants $5 million, but I'll talk them down to $4.5 million if you'll make it up for me over with one of my other players. Is that a problem? Because why? They're not putting their interest first, right? They owe that fiduciary responsibility to each of their principals, right? Now, the other key thing I want you to walk away with, I'll get you out of here. The employment situation in the United States. When you go to work for a business, do you owe them a fiduciary responsibility? Yes, you owe them to put their interest first. The flip side of that is, in the United States, business owners and operators, like Jordan's third-party management company, are responsible for the acts of their employees. That's why if one of Jordan's bartenders overserves somebody, the person that gets injured because of that, they probably don't care about the bartender. Who are they going to sue? The company. We call that respondeat superior. The superior is responsible for the acts of the employee. That's why you have an obligation to hire right and to train right effectively. We'll talk more about that in chapters 7 and 8. Hold on. Everybody understands we're not going to be here Tuesday? Spencer will post the assignment. If you have questions, reach out to Spencer. Go. I know you got to get out of here. Hey, this is a great conversation today. I hope you walk away with the outcomes. Good work.